Buenas noches a todos. Good night. Nick, are you okay?
Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry.
Good night means I can go home.
Sí, si me dices buenas noches es que me mandas para la
I have
cama
the same jacket on.
y que me puedo ir a
Yeah.
casa.
Yeah, I only have one jacket.
I
It's
realized.
bad.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Well, not a few.
Te voy a hacer una serie de preguntas, bueno, varias preguntas, vamos a estar aquí una hora.
I wanted to start at the very beginning.
Quería empezar por el
The way I
principio,
see this proclivity for writing comes at the very early
explicar
age,
cómo
like you
yo
start
tuve
making up
esta
stories in your
tendencia
head,
a ser
when you're-
novelista
before
desde que
you're a
tenía
teenager,
12,
when
13
you're a child, when
años,
you're 12,
cuando era
something.
realmente adolescente.
And, I'd like to know when you did start,
Me gustaría saber,
writing something
tú cuando
resembling fiction,
empezaste
or
a
having the
escribir
idea
algo que se
of,
parecía a la
wanting
ficción,
to write
o tenías
fiction,
esta
even if
idea
it
de
was not
empezar a
very good,
querer
the result.
escribir, aunque el resultado no fuera muy bueno todavía.
Well, the short answer is no.
Bueno, la respuesta es no, a
I
mí no me
went
pasó
to,
entonces.
a very traditional,
Yo
not very
fui
good school.
A un colegio muy tradicional y no muy
I
bueno,
cannot remember writing anything
donde realmente
that
no
was
recuerdo que
fiction
escribiera
at all as
nada
part
que
of
fuera
my schoolwork.
ficción,
I had
aparte
to,
de mi trabajo para el
parse
cole.
sentences and
Escribía
lots of grammar, and
frases
lots of
en
dictation,
pasado,
and,
escribía muchos dictados,
I
aprendía
read
mucha
quite a lot,
gramática,
but at that stage
leí
in my
bastante,
life,
pero en esa fase
there
de
was
mi
really
vida
no, ambition to
realmente no
write
tenía ninguna ambición de
fiction.
escribir ficción.
My first real, very intense connection
Creo que realmente mi
with
primera
writing
conexión
was,
intensa con la escritura
music journalism when I was a
fue
teenager.
cuando era un
This was the
adolescente,
first
cuando
writing that
empecé
really
realmente a hacer algo
excited me.
parecido
I
al
was
periodismo.
reading,
Yo leía
people in England who were quite famous
a
at
gente
the
muy
time and
conocida entonces en
influenced me in
Inglaterra y
lots
eso
of
me empezó a
ways, not
influir
just
mucho. Leía
with their
realmente
musical
cosas
taste, but
tipo
attitude
periodísticas,
and,
no solo por mi gusto por la
taste
música,
in
sino
books,
con
taste
su
in films,
actitud, su gusto por la
so
música, por los
new music
libros,
can
por las
express
películas,
in the 1970s
las nuevas
was-
maneras de
was,
expresarse musicalmente.
really the first time that
Que realmente
I
fue
had any
entonces
ambition of my
cuando yo
own
empecé a
towards
tener
writing.
mi propia
I
ambición
think
de querer
it
escribir.
didn't come properly
Y creo que
until
no
after
surgió
university.
como de manera correcta hasta después de la universidad.
Again, at university I wasn't a very good
En la universidad
student.
yo
I
no
didn't
fui muy buen
read things
estudiante.
that really inspired me, and it
Empecé
took
a leer
while,
cosas que quizás empezaron a
for
formar mi
that to
inspiración.
stop. And then
Y
I guess really in my mid-20s
tardé
I
tiempo
began to read
realmente
things
en
that
arrancar de
I
otra
loved,
manera. Solamente a
and
mediados de los
then I
80
began to
empecé
think,
a
I
realmente
want to
a
write
leer cosas que me
fiction.
gustaban
So really
mucho y
it
entonces
wasn't
empecé a
until my
pensar que
mid-20s.
quería
And which were the
escribir
music
algo
journalists you
realmente
mentioned?
tipo a la
Which were the
ficción.
ones that
O sea, que fue
influenced
realmente a mediados de los cuando yo tenía
Well,
veintitantos.
there were, 3 or
¿Cuáles eran
4,
tus favoritos
all of
en la
whom
infancia?
went on to be quite famous in
Bueno,
England.
luego
There
todos
is,
fueron bastante conocidos.
there was a very young writer called Julie Burchill.
Julie
who
Burchill,
is,
una
I think,
escritora muy
my
joven,
age
que creo que es de
now,
mi edad
but,
ahora,
and she turned into a kind of crazy right-wing
pero
columnist.
ahora se ha convertido como una escritora de
but she was a
columnas
fantastic music
realmente
writer.
como muy de
A
derechas,
guy
pero era
called Danny
fantástica.
Baker,
Danny
who was a
Baker
very good,
también,
still is a very good radio
que era y sigue
DJ,
siendo un
and
disc
he's
jockey
very
muy bueno
funny.
de radio y es muy
There were a
divertido.
couple of people like that.
Ya no sé, gente
I
así.
can see the relation because
Puedo ver
in
la
England,
relación porque en
the way I
Inglaterra,
see music journalism
como yo
is
veo el
also
periodismo
written with
musical,
humor.
es escrito
There's
también
Yes.
con humor.
Try to give it a twist of, make it
Intentan,
funny.
como
Yeah.
no sé, darle un
It was
giro de
funny. It
hacerlo
was,
divertido, ¿no?
some of those
Sí,
people
era divertido.
were
Esa
really
gente era
properly
realmente
funny.
muy
Of
divertida.
course, the relationship between
Y la relación
literature
entre la
and humor
literatura y el
is
humor
always quite difficult.
siempre es
So,
difícil, bastante
you
difícil.
can't always find
No
writers that
siempre
make you
puedes
laugh
encontrar
in
a
the world
escritores
of
que te
literature.
hagan reír en el ámbito de la literatura.
Jonathan Coe, we were
Jonathan
discussing
Coe,
that,
¿no? Antes hablábamos de él.
told me that he saw the light
Me dijo que él vio la luz
in terms of the possibilities of
en cuanto a las
writing.
posibilidades
And when
de
he
la
read,
escritura,
David Knopf's
cuando
Reginald Perrin, Perry
leyó
Knopf, and that
las novelas
it was when
de
he saw
Reginald
that it
Perrin,
could be
de
done,
David
that you
Knopf,
could mix,
y decía, bueno, eso es algo que se puede
social
hacer.
commentary
Puedes
with
mezclar
this
como la
kind of,
crítica social
sad
con
humor.
esta
That's the
especie
only
de
way
como
of
de
describing it,
humor
sad humor.
triste, ¿no?
Was there any
O negro.
writer that told you this could be done? What do you do now?
¿A ti hay
Yes,
algún
the,
como escritor que
the
te dijo
American
esto es lo que se
writer
puede
Ann
hacer?
Tyler.
Sí, Ann Tyler, la americana.
I think for me, it wasn't so much the social she doesn't have the same social commentary, but for me,
No hace esta
it
especie como de
was,
comentario, crítica
pathos,
social. Para mí también fue
comedy,
la comedia de Payfrost,
quite complicated
que era muy
relationships,
complicada, tenía unas
and the
relaciones muy
big thing
complicadas
was,
y realmente
accessibility, that it was
la
written,
accesibilidad
very simply, it was
o
very
accessibility,
engaging,
perdón,
immediately
se escribió, está escrita de una manera muy sencilla, inmediatamente entrabas en ese mundo, inmediatamente veías el mundo en el que iban a ir los personajes.
pushes you back with
Y
the
esa, a
language,
veces la
and
literatura
he
con el
pulled me
lenguaje
in.
que
So,
utilizan te llevan, como que
when I
te
read
hace,
her
te
for the first
te
time, I
hace como
really
alejarte,
felt
te da un
I'd
cierto
been
rechazo. Sin embargo,
electrocuted. I mean, I
en
just-
este tipo de libro
as
a
this
mí
is-
me
this
atrajo, fue
is-
como si me
I
diera un
want her
calambrazo.
job, I
Yo
want
decía,
her job.
esto sí es lo que quiero hacer,
I
yo
want
quiero
to
su
be
trabajo, el
her.
de ella, yo quiero ser ella.
And speaking of sad humor,
Que hablando de este
your
humor
novels have always had
triste,
this sort of
siempre
melancholy
hay esta
tinge.
especie de tinte de melancolía en
It's
tus
humor with
obras.
a
Es
tinge of
humor
regret
con
or
un
sadness
cierto
in the
matiz
background.
de
And I find it very unfair
lamento,
when
de
I
tristeza.
read reviews of your
Y
novels
me parece
saying,
muy poco
praising
justo cuando
books
leo
with just,
ciertas
I
críticas
laughed
donde alaban
so much and
solamente
it's,
una parte del libro y
very
dicen, me he
humorous, but
reído
forgetting
tanto,
the sad
mientras
part.
que
I think
olvidan la otra
what
parte
makes
más
your books
triste, ¿no? Y
interesting
creo que
is
lo interesante de tus libros
sadness,
precisamente es la
guilt
combinación
with
de culpabilidad, de tristeza
Well,
con la risa.
the characters are real
Bueno, los
to me.
personajes para mí
and
son
the
reales.
reading that I enjoy most
Y a mí lo que más me gusta leer
books
son
where, the
libros
characters have three
donde los
dimensions
personajes
and
son
they have
tridimensionales,
problems as well as-
donde tienen
as
problemas,
well as humor in
donde
the
también
situations.
viven situaciones de humor.
I think the trouble with a lot of comic
El problema
writing
con
is
muchos
that,
de los escritores
you start off
de este
laughing and
tipo
then
es que
the
cuando
last
son cómicos a veces tú empiezas riéndote
1/3 of the book
y eso no se
is,
dura como un tercio del libro.
a lot of loose ends, wrapping up a lot of loose ends,
Y luego es
usually
como
connected
muchos
with
cabos
some drug
sueltos
smuggling and a
que
dead
quedan ahí
body and,
deshilachados y luego al
you
final
think, okay,
intentan como
enough
hilarlo
now.
todo y al final dices, bueno, ya vale, ¿no?
I guess what I loved about the
Y
Ann
quizás
Tyler
lo que me
books is
gusta
that,
de
first
los
of all, I
libros de
cared
Ann
about
Tyler,
the
básicamente,
predicament of the characters, and,
es el predicamento de sus
I think each
personajes.
thing adds piquancy to the other.
Y que todo se va sumando unas cosas a otras, las cosas divertidas, luego con las tristes y viceversa. Bueno, yo creo que el humor es un mecanismo para expresar ideas complejas, a veces tristes, pero sin parecer que lo haces de una manera afectada o demasiado solemne o pomposa, ¿no?
I think unless you are writing
Creo
you know,
que
a proper
salvo
Shakespearean
que
tragedy,
estés escribiendo una tragedia típicamente de Shakespeare, creo que realmente no hay ningún motivo para que no metas un poco de humor en un libro. Nosotros nos reímos, en cierto modo, en algún momento del día, todos los días de la vida. Con los programas de televisión intentamos reírnos todos. Siempre hay algún momento del día donde realmente es una comedia, incluso se hacen a veces bromas en los funerales. Y entonces tú coges estos libros y a veces en mucha literatura de ficción no para nada aparecen o nadie indica que haya chistes, bromas o que alguien realmente se pueda leer con ella. Parece como que no es el trabajo o que no es en la literatura más seria, como que no es un trabajo serio hacerlo. Quizás es por ese deseo de que te tomen en serio precisamente como escritor. Quizás hay gente que piensa que si no mete humor en sus novelas, entonces quizás lo que escribe es algo más serio o puede tocar temas más serios. Bueno, quizás en cierto modo, hasta un cierto punto, eso puede ser verdad. Es más difícil, evidentemente, que la gente se tome algo en serio cuando metes ciertas bromas o chistes. Pero yo creo que cuando uno es joven tienes esa ambición de que te tomen en serio, pero creo que después, cuando pasa el tiempo, dices, yo no sé si me toman en serio o no. Lo único que sé es que tengo lectores, que estoy escribiendo los libros que quiero escribir, y esto a mí me parece suficiente. Sí, es suficientemente difícil así, ¿verdad? Le dice Kiko. Sí. Y bueno, no sé si es una de las partes buenas o no de la literatura, pero creo que es algo con lo que yo puedo vivir. Sí, parece que, como decíamos, el humor no tiene muy buena reputación, quizás no tanto en Inglaterra, porque allí el humor es un poco como en la fibra de los ingleses. Y le dice Nick, nosotros lo hemos invitado. Dice, no, nosotros con Cervantes lo inventamos y vosotros lo habéis copiado. Pero bueno, los ingleses siempre han considerado el humor como un signo de inteligencia, de ingenio, desde el jazz Shakespeare, de un tipo de inteligencia muy particular. Pero también hay esa como solemnidad pomposa que se dice, no sé, Shakespeare era divertido, Dickens era también muy divertido, ¿no? Bueno, sí. A mí también, cuanto más mayor me hago, aprecio más, por ejemplo, a Dickens como un gran prosista. Los personajes, evidentemente, muchas veces son como caricaturas grotescas, pero hay miles de ellos realmente, de estos personajes de Dickens, que tienen esta energía que es realmente increíble. Y sí, es verdad que tenemos como esta cepa genética del humor en Gran Bretaña. Pero yo creo que el modernismo a comienzos del siglo XX mató esta conexión entre la literatura y el humor. Creo que no muchos de esos escritores eran divertidos y creo que eso, puso en marcha un nuevo periodo durante 100 años de lo que era otro tipo de literatura, que es una pena, dice Kiko. Pues sí, es una pena. Sí, antes has comentado que tú, en cierto modo, estás escribiendo los libros que te gustaría leer. En cierto modo, estás escribiendo para ti mismo. Antes hemos hablado de Elmore y Leonard. Creo que era Neil Gaiman quien dijo que hay que reírse siempre uno de sus propios chistes. Como norma, ¿eh? ¿Tú te ríes de tus propios chistes? ¿Te parecen graciosos? No siempre los encuentro divertidos, pero si pienso que algo funciona, entonces lo veo de otra manera el trabajo, ¿no? Digo, sí, quizás esto pueda ser divertido, ¿no? No sé, levantas así un poco la ceja y dices, bueno, igual sí. Creo que reírte de tus propios chistes es un poco problemático, pero bueno, no sé. Yo creo que sí, que ahí hay algo que funciona. Quizás creo que nadie te haya preguntado esto, y estamos en un momento muy importante de la entrevista. Estábamos hablando de Kurt Vonnegut, y has dicho que le admiras, yo también, uno de los grandes escritores. Y en Palm Sunday, Domingo de Ramos, él lo que hizo es como clasificar sus propios libros, ponerles nota como sobresaliente o insuficiente a otro. Y me gustaría hacer lo mismo con tus novelas. Esto es una sorpresita para ti. No, tú les pones notas, le dice Nick. No, si te va bien, las tengo aquí en este caballete. Y me he olvidado de una, que la voy a escribir ahora. Me he olvidado de poner A Long Way Down, que en castellano era En picado. ¿Quieres que lo haga yo o lo haces tú? Te levantas y lo haces tú. De 0 a 10. 10 lo mejor, sobresaliente, y en 0 pues 0, lo que es. Fever Pitch 5, que es fiebre en las gradas. Alta fidelidad, High Fidelity 5. 5, eso no es justo. ¿Cómo ser bueno? 5.5. 4.5, 4.5.
Slam 4.5.
4.5 a Slam, toda una chica.
Juliet Naked 5.5.
5,5 a Juliet desnuda. Permíteme que te diga que es de 0 a 10, ¿eh?
Did you say 5.5?
5.5.
Lordy.
And A Long Way Down.
Y A Long Way Down.
4.5.
En picado. 4,5.
That's a depressing consideration.
Es un poco depresivo, ¿no? Como
I am depressed now.
notas. Estoy
Yeah, well,
hundido.
it's a depressing business, I think.
Bueno, creo que este es un negocio un poco depresivo. Creo que lo importante es que yo no se me ha dejado aquí espacio para mejorar, así que quizás el próximo sea el bueno. Una cosa, ¿por qué te puntúas tan bajo? ¿En ninguno realmente has conseguido lo que querías?
No, well,
You're expelled from the school. This for a start.
Te echamos del cole. Bueno, tú eres un escritor, sabes que siempre que escribes un libro, cuando empiezas dices, este va a ser el libro, va a ser el ganador. Y luego a medio libro dices, ay, quizás el próximo sea el bueno. Pero dices, vale, sigo adelante. Lo increíble es que una vez que has escrito varios libros y tu público en todo el mundo es bastante amplio, siempre va a haber alguien que te dice, este es mi favorito. Y quizás alguien aquí en el público va a decir, uno de esos, no High Fidelity, pero quizás otro es mi favorito. Y tú dices, vale, pues ha funcionado para esa persona. Y bueno, estoy un poco bromeando con estas puntuaciones, pero creo que realmente la idea es que todavía no lo has hecho, no has hecho lo que querías, porque si no realmente es donde voy yo, ¿qué más hago yo? Porque si no dices, ya está. Y sabemos que hay escritores que no fueron capaces literalmente de escribir otro libro más después de un gran éxito, como Salinger, por ejemplo. Hay una cierta arrogancia en eso, porque claramente están pensando, no solamente este libro fue un gran éxito, sino que era perfecto, y yo no puedo escribir ya nada más tan bueno. Y yo no pienso que los libros son perfectos, por eso yo sigo escribiendo. Bueno, no sé, puede ser algo terrible, ¿no? Antes estábamos hablando de una película, tú y yo, por ejemplo, este autor que hizo una única película, ¿no? Y luego ya no sabía qué más hacer. Bueno, las películas son distintas, dice Nick, ahí son las relaciones entre la gente. Cuanto más trabajo en el mundo del cine, más entiendo que necesitas productores majos, un buen editor, una fantástica banda sonora, un director de casting estupendo. Entonces, el hecho de que todo esto confluya es casi imposible, mientras que en los libros estás solo tú. Realmente no hay ningún motivo para que realmente no mantengas la calidad y que sigas mejorando un poco más cada vez. Y en todos tenía la impresión de que estaba como en la siguiente estación de una carretera a algún sitio. Sí, pero como que no llegas, le dice Nick, ¿no? Sí, ahí voy. Siempre tienes sensación de que estás volviendo a empezar, porque no estoy volviendo a escribir el mismo libro una y otra vez. Fever Pitch fue una autobiografía, High Fidelity, Alta Fidelidad era mi primera novela, About a Boy, un gran chico, la segunda, pero no tenía para nada autobiográfico. Cómo ser buenas, How to be good, fue la siguiente, se hizo en primera persona, como si fuera una mujer. Long Way Down tenía como múltiples personajes que eran como los escritores, que es la que se titula en picado en castellano. Y evidentemente eso en las películas, tú eso no lo haces todo y no puedes ser tan bueno. Creo que en Juliet desnuda, creo que ahí es una de las primeras veces donde dije, bueno, es una novela, es en tercera persona, ya sé quiénes son, ya he escrito varios libros antes. Y ahí me sentí como medio punto más cerca de donde yo quería estar. ¿Te parece cada vez más difícil a medida que pasan los años escribir? ¿O más fácil? Le pregunta Kiko. Bueno, más fácil en un sentido que es importante, porque ahora cuando empiezo un libro sé que llevo mucho tiempo pensando en él y eso quiere decir que yo sé cómo es la narrativa, de qué personas voy a hablar y sé que hay suficiente como para hacer un libro. En Fever Pitch o High Fidelity, ahí estaba aterrado, estaba pensando, la siguiente frase va a ser end, el final. Y sin embargo me quedaban 30 páginas, o sea, solo tenía 30 páginas, digo, ¿con esto qué hago yo? Y entonces ahí había un momento cuando tenía, no sé, 50.000 palabras y decía, ¿y si esto se publicara ahora? Quizás sería el libro más corto de la historia, bueno, pero todavía no he acabado, o sea que bueno, no está mal. Pero ahora ya tengo confianza para saber que voy a acabar el libro. Las ideas no son un problema, francamente. Yo lo que me temo es que es más difícil ahora concentrarse, pero no solo para mí, para todo el mundo. Por lo que hacemos ahora con todas estas máquinas con las que trabajamos, ¿no? Antes te lo comentaba, yo tenía un piso como fuera de mi casa y decía, no va a haber televisión aquí, pero sin embargo mi ordenador ahora se convierte en una cadena de música estéreo, en un centro comercial, puedes comprar desde él, en una televisión, y no le he pedido que lo haga, pero es que se ha convertido en eso, mi ordenador. Entonces, tu editor te dice, tienes que estar en Facebook, tienes que tuitear, tienes que hacer esto y aquello. Tengo más niños de los que tenía antes, más hijos. Entonces, todos estos problemas realmente hacen que la concentración no sea tan fácil. Kiko le dice que hoy has dicho en un periódico que odias escribir. A mí también me pasa eso, le dice. Bueno, soy un escritor profesional y tengo la impresión de que es un esfuerzo muy grande escribir una frase buena y a veces la escribes y dices, la tengo que ceder. Entonces con Twitter o pasas la mitad del día pensando, esta va a ser la línea que luego total la vas a poner en Twitter y se la lleva el viento, y está mal porque no estás dedicando ese tiempo a escribir tu libro. Y la otra alternativa es, lo tuiteas todo, aquí estoy hablando con Kiko en Bilbao, y acabo de hablar con Kiko desde Bilbao, ahora me voy a tomar un vino porque he dejado de hablar con Kiko. Es una locura. Me parece como que hay demasiada gente que está haciendo eso ahora. Y creo que es un fenómeno social muy interesante, porque si ocurre algo en el fútbol, en la política, si sigues Twitter y los trending topics, pues dices, todo el mundo está pensando esto, veo el valor que eso tiene, pero no quiero participar en ello. Y una vez entrevisté a Tracy Thorne de Everything But the Girl, y es una super tuitera, y ella me dice que para un artista que está empezando es bueno, porque en los 70, en los 80 tú sacabas un disco y luego la crítica se lo cargaba o te decía que era muy bueno, pero estabas desconectado realmente de tu público, de tus fans. Y lo que ella quería decir es que si tú tienes Twitter y, por ejemplo, no estás muy contento con tu trabajo, quizás hay mucha gente que te dice, no, es muy bueno, empiezas a recibir tweets. Sí, el peligro inverso es que a veces la gente no se cansa, ¿no? Yo conozco a un escritor que dijo recientemente, yo uso Facebook y me gusta bastante porque un par de veces a la semana pongo un link a una canción que me gusta o a un libro que he leído. Y este escritor decía que Facebook era como esas discotecas un poco roteras de una boda, mientras que Twitter era como una discoteca de hardcore en Berlín. Es alguien que es muy sincero en Twitter, muy abierto. Y por eso dice, bueno, eso es como una atmósfera mucho más dura, como en un club de Berlín. Y yo creo que Tracy Thorne, todo el mundo realmente gusta a todo el mundo y tiene un público importante, pero hay gente también, ciertos celebrities que han dicho hay que abandonar esto porque hay mucha gente luego que te invade, ¿no? Lunáticos incluso. Pierdes un poco esa anonimidad, o sea, la gente se esconde detrás del anonimato de Internet y tú pierdes un poco tu intimidad. Estaba pensando en cómo describes a las mujeres y también a las personalidades masculinas con cierta fragilidad, los excesos. Y cuando yo vivía en Cricklewood, no me preguntes por qué, en el 95 yo recibí un paquete de mi madre y venía High Fidelity, alta fidelidad, y me escribió mi madre, es que es como tú. Y yo cuando lo acabé no sabía estar orgulloso o realmente avergonzado, porque realmente es alguien que está paralizado por la culpa, no es un superhéroe. Me gustaría que me digas, no sé, ¿tú cómo ves estas obsesiones, este carácter de tus personajes masculinos? Escribes mucho sobre las obsesiones de ellos, ¿no? La música, el fútbol. Bueno, esto empezó en Fever Pitch, en Fiebre de las Gradas, porque yo era y sigo siendo un gran fan del fútbol. Y me pareció que, bueno, era divertido. Y es divertido porque es muy serio. Ser hincha de un club de fútbol. Y entonces tenía cierta perspectiva sobre mi propia seriedad y podía hacer chistes sobre ella, pero realmente quería que fuera serio. No sé. Y esa obsesión tiene un sentido porque surge realmente de una relación con mi padre, un poco a finales de mi adolescencia y cuando yo tenía 20 y tantos años me alejé un poco, no sabía muy bien lo que quería hacer. Entonces esas obsesiones a veces pueden llenar muchos agujeros de tu vida. Y esa es una buena manera de escribir sobre la vida. Si la vida está llena de agujeros, tú vas escribiendo sobre esos agujeros, así como sobre la vida. La gente habla de los hombres que aparecen en mis libros y dicen, bueno, no son gente con gran éxito, son neuróticos. Si yo hago una entrevista con un periodista y me dice, ¿qué te pasa a ti con los hombres? ¿O qué les pasa a tus hombres? Y yo digo, bueno, pero yo conozco algo de tu vida. Yo sé que te has divorciado 3 veces y que no ves a tus hijos, que no te va muy bien en el curro. Y me estás a mí preguntando por qué los caracteres, los personajes masculinos de mis obras son neuróticos, que es que muchos hombres son neuróticos, muchos hombres son así, o por lo menos hombres que yo conozco, no van por ahí pensando que son superhéroes con gran éxito, y si lo dicen o lo piensan, no son amigos míos y no son gente muy interesante sobre la que se puede escribir. Luego el tema es que el fracaso es más divertido que el éxito.
If you want to write about, a man who starts his own company and becomes the director, makes a ton of money, marries a beautiful woman, has 2 beautiful children, and lives a successful life, there's nothing for anyone there to write about. If you write about this guy, you're writing about the point at which it all goes wrong for him. Otherwise, there's nothing to write about. And I think that to write humorously, the idea of failure is built in to the idea.
And to be fair to them, to all your characters, there's a common theme in of your novels, it's the desire to change oneself.
Yes.
And many of them undergo, a soul cleansing, a cleansing of the soul, of trying to emerge from this crisis a better version of you, a better person in general. And an obvious example of this would be How to Be Good, but it happens in many of your
all the
novels.
books, yes. Yeah.
And I assume this is a very particular interest of you, yours, showing the
Well,
cleansing.
I think it's probably quite a modern phenomenon, actually. That, I think that everybody in this room, sometime in the last month, has said, in some way, I have to change. I have to change. I have to stop smoking. I have to go to bed earlier. I have to be nice to my children. I have to work harder. I have to stop tweeting. I have to stop playing games. Because there is much more opportunity in our lives to go wrong. I think if you look back to, I don't know, an old agrarian society where you had to work the fields and then you had to go to bed at dusk because there was no light and you had to get up the next morning to work again. Where is the opportunity really to go very wrong in this life? But now money is easier to come by, there is more potential for alcoholism, drug addiction, failed relationships. That's another thing. We are obsessed with our relationships because we have choices in our relationships. Because of divorce, because of cohabitation, all of these things have given us more opportunity to more mistakes. And so that is why self-help books are a huge industry, because people are obsessed with the idea that somehow they can make themselves better. Most of the time it doesn't happen, of course.
Which makes great novels.
Which makes for the novels. And maybe if you can affect some tiny change, then you have done something. But most of us, I give up in my head every day. Every day I think, I'm not going to do this anymore. And there are all sorts of things that I could go into that I don't want to do, but I do.
Very private.
Yes.
And you mentioned before, earlier on, these males and their obsessions and music and trying to fill their holes somehow. But also obsession in itself, it's a theme in some of your works. And for instance, in Juliet Naked, Duncan is obsessing over an altar, but you write a lot about these people obsessing about the whole obsession.
Yeah, well, I think that one thing that career has given me is to be able to see obsession from the other side, because Fever Pitch and High Fidelity, they are really about fan, and I think that Juliet Naked is really about the artist, and I suppose having a readership of my own, then I identify more with the other side as well. So I think that Juliet Naked, probably my sympathy is with the musician who feels that he is not understood properly, and he feels a fraud, in fact, because his fans project these fantasies about his intelligence and what the songs mean, and he's like, but I didn't mean any of this, so it's, in a way, obsession is the gift that keeps on giving, because it gives you an opportunity to about things from lots of different angles.
You said before that you described some of your early works like having autobiographical elements on them, and I remember the Sterkel said in his introduction to The Man with the Golden Arm by Nelson Algren, the difference between the interpreter and an artist is the showing of the self, the here I be, here I am. And I was wondering what percentage of yourself can be found in your novels. I know it's a bit of a shade question, that is this you in your books? But
well, ask me a question.
I'm still curious. What percentage?
Which characters? I can tell you exactly.
High Fidelity?
Well, that's the one. After that, I think it becomes harder to say that is you and this is not you. I mean, High Fidelity, I loved my music, and at the age of 35, I was at a certain point in life in terms of relationships, like the character. I mean, that character is more or less my age, and he has some of my interests. I didn't work in a record shop, but and a lot of the first part of the book, the old relationships, they are from my life, but I chose them because they seemed generic, that they seemed like the sorts of relationship that everybody has when you are talking to people. So the bits of my life that I think that are not going to resonate with people, then I leave out. The things that I write about, I know from talking to friends and later to readers, I know that these are the things that we all have in common. So I'm writing about myself the way that I know I represent people, and the rest I leave out.
A writer which I adore is Harry Crews, always said that was seduced to the making of worlds that never existed and contriving a tissue of lies. I like this expression, a tissue of lies that was truer to me than anything that had ever happened. So his point was that making lies to explain a bigger truth. And I don't know if this would apply to your work. Eventually, John Fante also said that trying to tell the truth through lies.
Yes. Well, I think that is what I love most about fiction, is that you go into a book with ideas about the world, and maybe something that you've been recently thinking about, and you can construct a story which illustrates this point more or less perfectly. I think when fiction goes wrong is when the story, you lose control a little bit story, and you think, okay, this is the logical thing to happen, but it's no longer illustrating me. But that ability to make up a narrative in order for you to tell the truth is the greatness of fiction, and something I think that you can never tire of if you're a writer.
I think it's great too, because you can say private things and terrible things, and by putting them in an alter ego, you can say things that you'd be ashamed to say in public.
Yes, so I think you get found out in the end. It's like, this character hates women. Oh, but so did that character, and so did that character, so did that character.
I'd like to discuss with you, because we've been talking about music a lot these last 2 days, and second time I mentioned Tracy Thorn in this interview, amazingly. But as when I was interviewing her, she reasoned that you cannot judge people by their record collections, and she found that a shame. But many of us used to do it all the time in the 80s, and Rob Fleming does it all the time in High Fidelity. And I love judging people by the records, but I cannot do it anymore. And I was wondering, do you feel the same? I mean, do you feel it's a shame that we cannot judge people by what music do they listen to?
Yes, I'm anxious about it. I think for me it doesn't so much, but for young people, I think that looking at people's record collections and book collections was so important for sex. Like, do I want to sleep with this person? No. Oh my God, look at these books. No. Oh, yes, I do. But now, everybody owns everything. I mean, with Spotify, it's literally true that there is no difference between me, you, because if you want to listen to this, it's in a box in your living room. Everything that's ever been made is in your living room. And well, maybe in the long run it will be good for us, because we will have to make judgments on less superficial things.
You have a point.
We will have to decide whether someone's a nice and clever person
without the record.
Without the record collections.
I think that the reason everybody did it all the time, it's because you get to have a certain taste. You had to go through a period of hardship and look records and ask someone who would point you there, and then go to that record shop. And I think now the taste is irrelevant, because everyone has an excellent taste.
Everyone has excellent taste. Also, everyone has access to so much, and I really don't want to talk about how in my age things were better, because it's like you might as well hang yourself when you are talking like this. All I want to say is it was different, not better or worse. But when I was 16, I took a job on Saturdays in a shop, and this money went to football one week and a record the next week. You know, the home games of the team one week and an album the next week. Football match, album. So At the beginning, I had one record, the first one, and I played it all the time.
Which one was it?
The first record I ever bought was Paul McCartney's first solo album. And so you know this track follows this track, you await the first bars of the next, and then you have 2 records, and then you have 3 records, and your connection with these pieces of music is incredible, actually, and very intimate, and you can hum guitar solos because you have them so many times. Now when my nieces and nephews and now my kids say, "Dad, I got an iPod, fill it up for me." And you think, oh my God, I just gave my niece 200 albums. She did nothing. She did nothing for it. It's illegal, by the way, what I did, and you mustn't do it at home. But this means that they have a completely different relationship with music. I don't understand how you can forge an intimacy with music if you can get this much all at once. So I say not better or worse, but really different.
And I seriously doubt that there was a point in that those records were talking solely about you. I mean, that you identified so much with that object, that object was you, there was no separation. That album is me. And I don't think that happens anymore. I don't think, if you listen to the Savages or this new band, I don't think that you can feel that.
Now you see, I think this might be old fart. Yeah, I think that kids find identification in the same way in music. And I think they find it in books. I think what will happen, we talk about the end of taste, is that there will still be people like us, younger versions of us, who insist on having their books and their music in their rooms. They say, I don't care if you can save the space and have a little box this high. I want this here because this is who I am. This is me.
The sad version of me. You've always defended pop as an art form, and well, a friend of mine says that pop music is a fourth dimension where we all go to lick one's wounds of battles, and that for that reason we have to give credit even to pop music for services rendered, because it made you dance or it made you be silly or something, and then you forgot about your troubles and everything. And you've always said this, and you've defended pop, silly pop tunes just because they're uplifting.
Yes, I mean, I realized relatively recently, I think, a ridiculous contradiction in my life, that when it comes to high culture and books and things like this, I am ferocious about relativism and say, so this book is better than this book. How do you know? Why is one literary art form superior to another? Why is Virginia Woolf better than Elmore Leonard? And I dispute this all the time with people, and I say I think everything is the same. And if you think it's a work of art, it's a work of art. And then for a long time, with pop music, I said, no, well, that's shit, that's Shakespeare. That's shit, that's Shakespeare. And of course, it's the same in pop music. There is no hierarchy in pop music, and it's particularly absurd, actually, with pop music that we say that this 3-minute pop single is a work of genius. This 3-minute pop single with the same instruments and same words is shit. It makes no sense. It's a worry that we have built up very curiously, I think, the last 50 years, that there is this hierarchy. And I am coming to see in all kinds of pop music, I think. And there is a book I would like to recommend to you and to anyone who is interested. It's a very unlikely book, but there is a series called the 33 1/3 series about albums. A Canadian called Carl Wilson, like the Beach Boys, but not him, wrote his about Celine Dion. And the book is a work of genius because it is about relativism in pop music, and he took as his point that he hated Celine Dion, that she crushed his spirit, and to find out why other people listened, and discovered along the way is that they were people a lot like him, that he couldn't judge their connection. Their connection was real. And there were some really interesting things about what he had thought about pop music. For example, Celine Dion, I'm sure you like her, but
I can see the appeal.
But one of the things is she can sing. I mean, she hits her notes. Another thing about her is her records are immaculately produced and played by expert musicians. In our world, we prize incompetence.
Shitty sound.
Yeah, if someone can't play their instruments, good, yeah, fantastic. Well, not in this music. In soul music, they have to play their music. Punk music, it's better if they don't play their music. And how do we arrive at these arbitrary distinctions? And he starts to laugh at himself and about how he only listens to music that makes you want to cut your wrists, because he's a rock critic. That's what rock critics do. Is the Velvet Underground and Heroin and all of these songs. And Celine Dion sings about love and happiness, and he despises this, and he begins to doubt his philosophy. It's a really good book.
I think you made the same distinction in 31 songs when you
Nelly Furtado.
Nelly Furtado, but one of the most beautiful and brave and admissions of 31 songs that you didn't want to do difficult or dangerous music anymore. The example you put in the book was Suicide, Johnny Teardrop.
Frankie Teardrop.
As was praised by critics as like getting a shot in your head. And that you rather listen to Teenage Fan Club. Thank you very much.
Yes, I don't want to feel as though I'm being shot in my head.
Yes.
Why does anyone want to feel as though they're being shot in the head with something they are choosing to do in their spare time? This seems incredible to me.
I think this has earned you some criticism too. We were discussing about your review of Kid A by Radiohead, and in reality, I think your approach is a no fucking nonsense approach. It's like you don't believe in the new club.
No.
It's just, if it works, it works. If it's complete, it doesn't to be.
Well, I am extremely suspicious of pretend, and what I prize above all, I think, is simplicity, which creates complexity, because you put a simplicity on top of another simplicity on top of another simplicity until you begin to get some complicated picture. But if the simple thing doesn't exist in the first place, it's built on sand, I think, and it can all collapse on you. I think that's for me of any art, is that you achieve an incredibly sophisticated effect through very clean and simple lines that everyone can understand.
I think that's the beauty of pop music.
And that's the beauty of pop music.
The more condensed it was, the better it worked.
But I think, again, it's another, we have been drawn into a ridiculous argument in some ways with the pop music versus classical music, because music used to be pop music, and the reason it's classical music is because it's lasted a long time and it's been taken out of one kind of environment and put in a kind of environment until it becomes high art. And this is true of Shakespeare. Shakespeare was, I wrote about a book that described one year in Shakespeare's life, and what is very clear that Shakespeare wrote for money. He wrote, in 1599, he wrote 4 of his greatest plays, 1599. 4 of his greatest, because he needed to provide money for himself, he needed to provide work for the theatre company. It was very practical, and he had a poor audience. And of course, move on 400 years, then he has become this, which belongs in theatres and museums, is not understood by everybody, because the simple language that he used has become complicated language simply because it's archaic language. It was not the point at all. The point at the time was that he spoke to people directly. He confused people with a lot of words that they didn't understand, like now. And no, I think it's been the same with artists throughout history, that they were popular, they survived, and in the act of surviving, they become something else.
You've discussed Dylan many times in 31 songs.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Dylan earlier on, you and me, that I know you like many of his records, but it's very dangerous to over-intellectualize pop music, precisely for what we were, that it needs to be simple, it needs to be sharp, it needs to go to the point. No? And
can I say something about that?
Indeed, please.
To illustrate, I think, what goes wrong with Bob Dylanologists, I just remember this, but there is a very English professor who huge Bob Dylan fan, and he's written a few books about Dylan, and I was reading one, and he talks about a rhyme, I can't remember the song, in a couplet, which is very bad. And he then spends 2 pages drawing why the rhyme was bad. So what was Dylan trying to say with making this bad rhyme? And I think you reach a certain point in your career where if you read line, then you have English professors saying, oh, this is interesting, why is he writing a bad line? And that to me is what's wrong with people who shit with Bob Dylan. I am still at the stage where if I write a bad line, they say, oh, that was a line, this guy can't write for anything.
That's the reason. There's a slight reason for hating all this over ferocity that some of these rock artists have become, because I ask you, as a fan of pop music, what was wrong with My Boy Lollipop, for instance, or Shake Your Money Maker, or Me Do? Those perfectly brilliant songs.
Yes.
They didn't need to be...
If your number one desire is for profundity in lyrics, then My Boy Lollipop is not the good place to start. But it always seems to me that if that's what you want, there is lots of good poetry by good poets, and you could listen to My Boy Lollipop and read the poetry. You don't have to have poetry in the song.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you about English or Britishness, because in a way your books, although they talk about universal themes in a way, and they are very English. And then I stumbled in the part in 31 songs where you talk about Ian Jury's cheerful, and you say that that's the England you'd like to inhabit. That's what you like about England, and I wanted you to discuss a bit, what's this England that you'd love, imaginary or not?
Well, actually, he wrote 31 songs, and we had the Olympic Games in England, in London last year, and I think that Danny Boyle's ceremony for the Olympic Games, I was worried about it, but that ceremony, for me, had everything that I love about it. I felt really emotional about it because I felt elected and represented by that opening ceremony in a way that I am never by anything to do with the ceremony at an English occasion. Is always about the royal family and the national anthem and a lot of things that I don't see connection to at all. But Danny Boyle, he had our National Health Service, which most incredible achievement of the last 50 years in our country. It had Punk, he had Shakespeare, he had
Ray Davies, I think.
He had Ray Davies, he had, it was this wonderful mix of realism and humour and aggression and tunefulness and slightly left-wing politics. I mean, a lot of that is is gone or going, but that's an England that I connect with strongly.
And also multicultural with reggae, because
and another thing, of course, the multicultural aspect of England. It always feels strange now to go to other places where there are not so many races represented in the streets, and there is a lot of England that I feel extremely comfortable with. I suppose the interesting for the books is that I always thought, with Fever Pitch, I really thought, well, maybe 9 Arsenal fans will read this book because no one else will understand. And then you publish the book, and then a Liverpool says, I feel that way. And you think, oh yes, of course. A Liverpool feel this way. We're all the same. And then the book is published in Germany. A Borussia Dortmund fan says, how do you know how I feel about Borussia Dortmund? And oh yes, there is nothing, even though I use specific in these books, there is nothing specific about the feeling. And High Fidelity, at first, some people who live near me said, but this book is about us. This book is about people who live in North London. And you said, well, it's actually not about people who live in North London. It's about people, I think it's about people in first world cities, actually, all first world cities. And it's really not about North London any more than it's about anywhere else.
And didn't it break your heart when it was High Fidelity, the film was translated into in Boston? It broke my heart.
Chicago.
Chicago.
No, not. For the big reason why the guy who wrote the play and the people he was working with, they came from Chicago. John Cusack comes from Chicago, and Devi, who wrote the screenplay. And they came, they said, this book is about us. And again, you think, oh, okay, I didn't know it was about Chicago. But they also said, it's about us, but younger than you. So in England, you listened to R&B and to reggae, and you went to these clubs. In America, it was like this, but it was music, and so all the references were shifted to somebody who was a little bit younger, because the book was a little bit older when they were making the film. And they loved the book, and it meant something to them, and I wanted them to adapt it in a way that reflected this, that film made with great love by people who understood the book. And I didn't care that in London anymore. You could have made such a bad film, that book, and set it exactly where it was supposed to be. And in fact, on a very practical level, the music for a film is unbelievably expensive. So the English movie of High Fidelity, if it had been made, probably wouldn't have been able to afford any of the music that I would have wanted the book. So that would have been a terrible loss, I think, not to have the music. So no, I really, really like the film, and I love the people that made it. And it was important that Stephen Frears, who is an English director, was in charge of these people from Chicago, I think.
But still, many of the locations of your novels, many of the books are located in Islington, London, even though they talk about universal themes.
Well, I don't really see the point of, if I want to write about people who are living in cities, and Islington, where I live in North London, has, it's an interesting borough because it's a joke in newspapers that it is the home of the liberal intelligentsia. But it's also the poorest borough in London. So it really does have incredible, it's where Tony Blair lived before he went to number 10 Downing Street. Has a lot of social problems and everybody in between. So it's everything I need. I don't see the point of going to another city. I've always written about Islington. With Juliet Naked, I wanted people who were disconnected, so I wrote about an imaginary small seaside town because one of the points was to write about this guy who is on his own in his, this musician. His only connection is through the internet, so I am outside of the community, and the American musician I wanted to be partly because America it's much easier to lose yourself than England. England's too small to ever disappear.
This might be one of the reasons maybe write about, you know, I mean, you said them in Islington and these parts because it's what you're familiar with.
Yes, and it's a high-fidelity consolation to me in that way that I could say the name of this street and the name of this pub or whatever, and it didn't make any difference to somebody who was reading the book in Germany or Australia, and you think, okay, well, it's fine. I can, if I write in detail my community, it feels like somebody else's community to them.
Yesterday, I don't know if you remember that we were talking about Elmore Leonard's
10 rules, yes.
10 rules for writing. And I was wondering if you were not in that list, I would look for you. And I was wondering if you had any commandments. You still have any commandments in regards to writing. I mean, for instance, Leonard says, never start a book with the weather or the setting of...
Well, I mean, I always like reading these things, but if you wanted to this evening, you could find a book, maybe one of the greatest ever written, that begins with a description of the weather. I'll tell you one, Bleak House, kids, 2 pages of fog, the opening 2 pages. Well, there you are, do him any harm to begin with weather. So I don't really understand rules because you can always think of an example of a great writer who's done something different. I am when young writers me if I have any tips. I know these are so basic, embarrassing, but I always say to them, "Do you read?" And they go, "No, not really." I say, "Well, you can't be a writer until you've read." Writing is. And the other question, which is perhaps even more basic, is do you write? And they say, no, I mean, I can't find the time. And for me, those are the 2 big things. Be a writer, you have to write, and not just think that one day you are going to be a writer. They always want to know, oh, how do you get an agent? I say, have you written? No, but how do you get an agent? I say, you're not going to get an agent, you know, until you've written. The agent's not going to just... You don't find vacancies for novelists. You know, one novelist, no experience necessary. These jobs don't exist. And the one piece of practical advice I can give is if you are serious about writing a book, then write 500 words a day. 5 words is really not much. It's like 2 paragraphs. But books are 80,000-ish words. My books are something like this, 80, 70,000. If you do the maths, in 103 days, you will have written a novel if you write 500 words a day. 100 days, half a year, you can have a decent-sized novel. There is no big or challenge about this. And I don't know what I do with my time, why it takes me 2 years when I'm trying to write 500 words a day. But it's such an achievable, affordable thing to write a slump every day.
And you said that you have to read, but
yes.
you didn't. You had to read good books or bad books. Because
no.
A friend of mine said it is in pop music that there's a big difference between pop music and literature. And in pop music, you can have a terrible taste and make a great song. It does a terrible taste in music, have terrible records and listen to horrible music, horrible pop, but make single.
Yeah.
It's possible. Whereas, as a writer, you have to read good novels because...
I don't agree. I think that you have to read the thing that you think, this is what I want to do. And I don't think we can judge who that is going to be. If you read 50 Shades of Grey, and you say, my God, this is the greatest book I've ever read. I just want to be this woman, I want to write exactly like her. And you write like her, and you get and you make a lot of money. Good luck to you. But first, it has to be a proper that you connect with this book. Not, I want her money, I want her life. You think, I want this job. And that's what I had with, and who was it? Was yours? You said that you had somebody that... Yeah. That's all that the reading does. I don't think it's... And the other thing is, if you read somebody and you love them, and you have some talent of your own, then this comes as something else. I mean, when I'd written Fever Pitch and High Fidelity, there was a reason Tyler wrote to me, and she'd read High Fidelity, and she was very nice about it. But she could see no connection between her books, and she said, I don't get it, but if I helped you in fine, because I loved High Fidelity, and it comes out as else. Influence gets digested, and well, we stop the metaphor there because it becomes disgusting. But yeah.
But it shows you in a way that it can.
Yes.
For me, we were talking about Richard Brotigan. That's the I saw. This is achievable. I mean,
yes,
I can do this.
Yes.
Whereas if I look at
long either.
not very long. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Not very long and short sentences. Very lively, very vivid. Lots of rhythm.
Yeah, and I think why a long time to get started is because my university education, you come out with this university attitude that I'm only going to read new fiction. And I'm reading these people, I read Salmi, I read Julian Barnes, I think, I can't do this. And of course I couldn't do those things at all. He comes from a completely different tradition. Mine's much more influence things outside books as well as books themselves. But just read, and you will find somebody who you want to emulate. And I think you can tell people who that might be.
Yeah, but you mentioned talent and but do you think that talent has to be there? But without that, some proclivity, let's not call it talent, let's call it proclivity or tendency towards of stories or the making up of stories.
Yeah.
If that's not there, it's very difficult to come out.
I begin to think in all endeavor where success is achieved by relatively few people, it becomes self-selecting. I mean, I have two young sons, one is 10, one is 9, they both want to be football. One of them wants to be a footballer because he watches a lot of football on television. The other one wants to be a footballer, and all he does is kick against a wall in the garden on his own. And I don't think either of them will be football. I know that one of them has the mentality, which is that he wants to spend hours every day practicing. And with writing, I think so many people, maybe they write a book that doesn't exist and they stop. What separates writers from other people help it. So they get a book rejected, they write another one. They get the second one, reject the third one. And in the end, this becomes self-selecting. These are the people, the aptitude, they will teach themselves to get better. They will adapt to what it is maybe that other people need, or they will listen to advice. And the same with musicians, with sportsmen. You can see them because they won't stop.
But I think we writers, we got the end of the stick. because rock musicians, I mean, they spend some time writing an album, they record it, but then they go on tour and they play in front of live audiences, and their energy and the instant gratification of seeing the public reacting to it. Whereas we have the shitty end of business, which is being lonely in a room, and then when the book comes out, there's no one cheering you or shout with your songs. People may be sending you emails saying your book is great.
Yes, but there always is about exercise and whether we exercise before, and I try and go to a gym 3 weeks because I go crazy if I don't. But there might come a moment in the week sitting in a jacuzzi in my gym, and I look at the clock and it says 11:30 a.m. and I think, oh, this isn't a bad job. I mean, there are so many advantages to being a writer. There are probably people in the audience who might be working, as nurses or carers to old people, and they listen to you saying, oh, we have a shitty job.
And what do you find harder of writing? The loneliness, maybe, on your own in a room?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of, as well as prose, a lot of film in the last 3 years, and part of the idea was that in those things you have to have a meeting sometimes, not very often, but you think, oh, this is exciting, there are 5 people in this room talking a script, and they're talking about maybe actors being in it and things like that. With the novel, it's nobody talks to you for 2 years until the book, like you say. So I think you are not naturally unsociable. I am not naturally unsociable, but I have ended up doing it where I don't speak to anyone all day, every day.
And when you do, your voice comes out.
Yes, yeah.
With a very strange tone at the end of the day. I myself that I wouldn't ask you about football because I don't know anything about it, but
okay.
I think it'd be unfair for the audience if I didn't ask you at least one question about footy, and so general one because I don't really know much about the sport.
Well, first of all, I need to put my phone on.
Yes, go on.
Some of you might know that there is a big disaster for me because I agreed to come to a few months ago, and I'm very happy to be here, but Arsenal has a home game tonight, and I never ever miss a home game. So I'm going to put my phone on because my family promised to text me the score, and
your own thing while he's talk to yourself.
But there doesn't seem. If you are interested, text saying 1-0, Ozil, brilliant goal, 2-0, Giroud, Arsenal 2, Napoli 0 in the first half an hour of the game. So I'm really amazed and excited about this news.
So I don't know what's about football. What's so great about football?
But now is that I missed Ozil's first ever goal for Arsenal because.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. You're so nice, though, all of you people. So it's okay. It's okay.
Everything will be fine in the end.
What is so great about it?
And when did your relationship with Arsenal and football in general started?
Well, it started, I mean, I wrote about this in Fever Pitch, but my parents were divorced. My dad didn't know what to do with me. He took me to a stadium, real inspiration, and I walked in and, it was that thing. It was a moment where that was what I needed, and looking back on it, I was living with my sister and my mother, and suddenly I entered a place where there was 40,000 men, and they were older men and younger men. The idea that it wasn't just for kids, because usually when you're a kid you do things that are kids, but you look and you see a 70-year-old man swearing at the thing. Oh, I can do this forever. There's something about the rhythm of football that I think no other sport has, which is that a goal is a very rare thing. So it's a moment of completely excitement in a way that you see, I can't understand basketball because somebody wins 100 to 98. You think, why don't you just play in it and then work it out from there? Why do you have to play for an hour for somebody to win 100? This thing about, I mean, maybe Arsenal has won this game in the first hour. Maybe they won't, but maybe they have. And I don't think any other sport has this drama and rhythm. And of course, you feel a part of a community. And I'm in the Basque country and athletic and only Basque players, and that meaning. And Barcelona has a special meaning to Catalonians, and the world there are these things repeated.
I think there's not that many, or there used to be that many books written about football. That's why that might be one of the reasons why Pitch was such a big book for some people, because it was the first time someone was as much as with as an insider too.
And also, I wasn't a sports journalist. I think there are. My different perspective was that I only watch one team, whereas if they are paid to be neutral and to watch lots of different teams, I was never news only this team and every game for this team. So I did have the perspective of a fan and what it meant to suffer, to win sometimes, but to suffer mostly.
And I was wondering. If you plan to write more about football and.
Well, last year I wrote a little ebook about the season because the season in England was so extraordinary. There was really bizarre incidents of racism. There was a player who died on the pitch with a heart attack, but then was miraculously rescued. The championship did in the 93rd minute of the last game, and I thought, there are so many things that happened this year. And I wrote an essay that was sort of 8,000 or 9,000 words. We'll do that again, but I will not write another book because Fever, as definitive as I could get it. If I wrote again about how the game has changed since I wrote Fever Pitch, and I don't think that's an interesting subject for a book, maybe for a piece of journalism, yes, but a book that will mean a lot to people, I'm not sure.
I've come to realize that this, because we're running out of time now, but there's two kinds of writers, in a way, that some of them like to future projects, and others don't, and they keep smart. As a Brazilian artist I like, called Tom Zé, who says that an idea that you know, an idea is a secret. Una idea es un secreto. And I wonder if you're of the first kind, like that you always talk in your new books, or you just keep.
Well, I mean, I agree with him that it's a secret, but there comes a point where it's not an idea anymore. It's starting to exist, so that you are committed to it. And I mean, some of these projects, as I say, for film and television, and other people have started to read them, and they are halfway to being made or not made because it's such a terrible business. But this will sound like a stupid amount, I think, but it's, as I say, it's maybe the last 3 or 4 years. I adapted 2 books for screen. One is a very extraordinary memoir by an American woman called Sherry, called Wild, and it's about a walk, a hike that she took when very, very desperate circumstances from nearly the whole of America. And this has been quite a quick, and they start to film next weekend with Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon was my boss. She owned the book, and she to do it. And also I adapted Column's novel Brooklyn, but I adapted maybe 2 years ago, and still money and and the last piece of cast, and I've been trying a comedy, serious comedy for television, again over the same time period, about monogamy, which, and everybody always makes the same, the say about monogamy, you know, and
it's no fun.
It's no fun, but actually, most of us spend lives being monogamous. Even if you are 10 years and you have 4 affairs in 10 years, there is still a big chunk of this time when you're monogamous. And in fact, most of us don't do that. And you are an adult. People only write about your relationships right at the beginning or at the end of the relationships. But the time in between, people don't write about that much, and they really don't write about sex between a married couple. And so the idea is that I try and find ways, different ways, different problems with different. Their basic situation is that they are going to stay together. So they have to find ways of dealing with these problems. I was writing at HBO in America, and they said, but it's just all about sex. I told them, I said, I want sex and monogamy. And when I wrote it, they said, but it's all about sex and monogamy. Yeah, I told you that. But now, maybe with the BBC. And the proper job is a novel. I am, I know I've written enough to get to the end of it now, but it's partly come out of this work. And the last thing I wanted to write about a fictional time of the 1960s. So this was a time where, I'm not in Spain, but we had 2 television channels, and if you were a successful show, then nearly all of the country is watching you, so you are famous in a particular. And I wanted to write about collaboration, about what it is like to work creatively with other people, change you, and also how their relationships with each other and
Well, I was very comfortable. I could talk all night.
Yeah, me too. But do you mind if
I've heard a bit.
Somebody just texted me, somebody who doesn't know I'm in Bilbao, but knows that I support Arsenal, just texted me. But that doesn't really help me to understand what is happening.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Nick Hornby.
Thank you.
Should we?